welcome to Turn the Page, the official podcast of the Syosset Public Library.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Turn the Page. I'm your host today, Jen, and today I am joined by the author of an absolutely riveting thriller that takes place in a building and in the locale in New York City. It is the Long Island Reads choice for this year, and so we have some events happening in tandem with that out here on the island, and we are so excited. Let's have this conversation. Welcome to the show. Could I ask you to introduce yourself and your book, please?
Hi, my name is Chris Pavone. I'm the author of The Doorman, which was published a year ago in hardcover and is about to come out in paperback in time to be the Long Island's Read selection, which I'm extremely happy about. It's such a great honor. There are so many good things that can happen to a book, but so many of them are honestly tainted in some way by everybody's self-interest and politics. And this one seems especially pure because it's nothing other than a choice made by librarians about a book that they think that their community will enjoy. And that's the best type of recommendation.
That's so lovely. And this is a great pick for the island and for our community in particular. A lot of the librarians here who have already read it have been raving about it for this past year. And so it's been so nice to finally catch up with them and to read this book. Before we talk about The Doorman specifically, could you just fill us in, our new listeners, maybe a little bit on your career and your journey as a writer and some of the books that led up to this project, perhaps?
Yeah, I started working in publishing right after college because I wanted to be a writer, but I became an editor and I did that for nearly 2 decades. And then my wife got a job in Luxembourg and we moved abroad with our then 4-year-old twins and our dog to a place where I no longer had a career. I no longer had my family or friends or support system or identity. I didn't speak the language. I didn't know how to do anything. I, in particular, did not know how to make a whole new set of friends and build a whole new life and be at home with little kids all day long, every day. And I started to write about it. And that experience became my first novel called The Expats, which I started writing when I was an expat in 2009. And then we decided to move back to New York, and I finished writing the book. And that was the beginning of my novel career. That book was published in 2012. The Doorman is my sixth novel. They are all thrillers of one sort or another. Some of them are international. A couple of them are set largely in New York. The Doorman is set almost entirely in New York City, almost entirely in one building, and almost entirely in one day.
I was fascinated by this limited scope in terms of the setting, but it still feels epic in a lot of ways because there are, a lot of characters from different walks of life who we meet, a lot of events, high stakes, high tension events, all sort of coalescing at the same time. So there is sort of an epicness to it, even though it has, this restricted scope. What was the inception point for this? Was it a character, the location itself, or a social issue that you wanted to explore?
It's all of those, and it's all of those come together. I'm a pretty deliberate person when it comes to figuring out what book I want to write and why I want to write it. And I don't just jump in and start writing. I spend weeks or months or even years jotting out character studies and plot ideas and trying to figure out a way for all of those things, the plot, the setting, the characters, the tensions, the themes, for all of those things to not only be reliant on each other, but to be indivisible from one another. And I try to create a story, and this one I think does it the most effectively of all my books, where all of the elements have to be together, that the characters are there because of the plot, and the plot is there because of the characters, and they're both there because of the themes. And the themes for in this book are the themes that have been consuming America for the past decade. I think they are class and race and racism and the corrupting influence of money. And furthermore, I've added on things to make the interpersonal more dynamic of marriage and adultery and sex and betrayal and crime and punishment.
I'm really fascinated by the way that, this building, the Bohemia, is a world in microcosm. It's its own ecosystem with its own hierarchy, with lots of very nuanced relationships. And our main character, Chicky Diaz, has a very interesting point of view on the residents of this building and of the, surrounding area. Can you talk about developing him as a character? The various influences that sort of went into him, especially given the topics that you wanted to explore.
The main influence for Chicky Diaz was a real doorman in my real building named Johnny Iritzari. And we just moved into this building 6 years ago. The first person we met was Johnny. He was a guy who worked the front door during the weekdays, and that's the time that I see and interact with most of the doormen. And I spent a lot of time with Johnny. I spoke to him every day, and for the first years that I was living here, we spoke mainly about small things, about the Yankees and the Mets and the weather and what types of inflammatories, anti-inflammatories to take for our injured middle-aged man knees. We grew up just a few miles from each other at really the same time in very much the same city, 1970s and 80s New York City. Um, we had very different lives, and they intersected here at the front door of a building that I lived in, that he worked in, and he was perfect for this job. Johnny had the type of outgoing personality and warmth that you could feel from across the street. He was always happy to interact with our neighbors and their dogs and their children and passersby and tourists and everybody. And people who moved away from this building would come back just to visit Johnny. And then one day he got sick and he went to the hospital and did not emerge for months. And then he spent some more months at home recuperating. And then he decided to come back to work and to hold the door and hail cabs and carry bags while also definitely dying. And one day at the end of his shift, another doorman asked him how he was feeling. And he said, "I'm so tired, man." And he went home and he died. And he had such a long time to figure out what was going to happen after he died. And the thing he chose for his memorial service was for it to be held 2 blocks away from this building so that people he worked for could more easily come than the people he lived with. And he lived his entire life basically on 1 block in Spanish Harlem. This is the only job he ever had. He started doing this job when he was 20 and he died doing it when he was 57. And I thought that that sort of life was incredible and a throwback to something that we don't value that much anymore, which is a working class job that is dignified and that you get to, if you don't die from some horrible thing first, you get to grow old with a pension and with dignity. And I think that's something that America valued when I was a child and has valued less and less every day that I've been alive. And now we barely value it anymore, while the rest of the world is figuring out how to make that type of life possible. And that type of job and that type of tension is something that I very much wanted to explore in this book. This tension, this class tension of people from very different backgrounds coexisting in the same moment of time in the same space.
It's a fascinating perspective. Like a lot of, I was going to say New York City jobs, but these jobs exist elsewhere, but they kind of give New York City its flavor. A particular sort of job, like a cab driver or a bartender who is public facing, but who people will act as though isn't there or is invisible sometimes, so you get to see a lot of really interesting things in that position. And that definitely helps his story develop because of the things that he sees and gets involved in at this job. Could you talk a little bit more about populating this building, the other characters? Was there a character who was the toughest to crack, or is there the one, maybe one who was your particular favorite, who you have a fondness for?
That's a great question. I don't think I write characters that are difficult to crack because if they are, then I don't write them.
Mm.
And all of my characters are, to some extent, some type of version of me. Like, what if I were a billionaire who's also horrible? What would I be thinking then? What if I were that billionaire's wife? What if I were that billionaire's wife and I had not married a billionaire on purpose? I'd simply gone out into the world looking to do something in the art world and dating artists and struggling to pay the rent and struggling to afford food. And then one day when I'm in my 30s, this man shows up and he sweeps me off his feet, not because he's so damn charming, but because he has essentially an unlimited amount of money. And that amount of money is not just a way to afford a nice place to live or private planes. That amount of money is the type of thing that allows you to go out into the world and do anything, to support any causes you want to support, to give money to whatever organizations you want to give money to help the world be a better place in a way that you cannot do if you are poor. And one of the things I'm asking readers to do in this book, throughout this book, is to put yourself in these characters' shoes and ask yourself, what would you do? And that's really what's going on in this story. All of these people, the billionaire, who's really a small part in the story, the billionaire's wife, who's a huge part of the story, the doorman, and another main character named Julian, who's a middle-aged art dealer who seems to be aging out of the relevance of his life. They are all confronting serious problems on the same day, problems related to their entire lives and their ambitions and their finances and their marriages and what type of people they're going to be in the world and what things they owe to one another. And I'm trying to ask you as the reader, all of these people are making pretty questionable choices. What choices would you make? And how do you judge other people for making choices in these challenging situations?
Yeah, there's a lot of situations that it really stressed me out to think about what I would do in them.
Well,
It made
good.
me, yeah, I'm
It's a
grateful.
suspense novel, and I think it's pretty clear from the opening sentence that somebody is going to die in this book, and that your journey as a reader is to find out who and when and where and how, and I think most interestingly, why. Why is this person going to die? And when you get to this, the denouement of this book, I hope that two things happen. One, you are surprised, and two, it absolutely makes all the sense in the world.
Yeah, I'm really curious about that choice to sort of like front load that that sort of foreboding and how that relates to how you create suspense and how that figures, I guess, how that relates to structure. How do you use the structure of the novel to manipulate like pacing and stuff like that to reveal character? And like how does that all relate to the experience that you want the reader to have?
I don't know if you are completely aware of it, but you just asked all the most important questions about writing a novel in like 10 seconds. And there's no way to answer all of those in less than a year.
Yeah.
Um, like a few things. One is about presenting the audience with a preview of what is going to happen is something that I deeply admire in books, in movies. Here it is. Here, I'm going to tell you what is going to happen, and now watch it happen. I love that as a way of structuring something. Two, I feel like pacing is one of the most misunderstood aspects of writing suspense fiction, or in fact, any fiction. People sometimes talk about how much they love a novel for it being fast paced. That's almost never true. When people talk about loving a novel for it being fast paced, what they're almost always saying is that it's exciting. But the pace is rarely fast. And the pace is rarely fast because you can't really sustain a credible fast pace over the course of 10 to 15 hours of reading. That's exhausting and it's not credible. And the type of fast pace that you can stomach in a movie that's 93 minutes long is a very different type of pace and credibility than the pace of the novel experience, where you do have to sustain it for somebody's reading for a month. And the pace, if it's relentless, is actually not enjoyable in almost any circumstances. And when we look at the books that people think are super fast paced, if you actually look at all the action that's going on, scene by scene, chapter by chapter, there's not that much of it. What we're talking about when we're often talking about pace is really just tension. And tension is so reliant on character and withholding answers to important questions. So, what I'm trying to do throughout most of the book is develop character, define tensions, ask questions, withhold answers.
Mm. That's so interesting, because I think people tend to discuss character-driven stories versus plot-driven stories as though they are, diametrically opposed. And I don't think that's always the case, especially here, because I think you do some really nuanced character work, and it is very tense, and it feels like it moves fast in terms of like how you are flipping through the pages, which I think people also maybe confuse pacing for. Like you are moving quickly as you read, but the plot is, developing at its own pace. How do the alternating POVs relate to this? Does that play a role in how you generate suspense or tension?
Absolutely. I want everybody, I try to make readers invested in all of these characters. And there are three main characters in this book. There are also some minor ones who get their own point of view, including something very subtle that's in five of my six books, which is that I have something that probably you didn't notice and almost nobody notices. Maybe nobody notices, but I notice it's there just for me, that there's at least one sentence from the point of view of a dog. And the other people get slightly longer points of view, but I want everybody, I really hope that readers are invested in all of those points of view and all of those characters' motivations. And I try to make sure that the book doesn't progress for too long of a period without visiting with each character at a reasonable amount of time. If you're going to be reading this book for a half an hour, I want you to have been with each character during that half an hour. I don't want you to forget about these main people. And the minor people, it doesn't matter if you forget about them. That's fine with me. Like if you go 150 pages without knowing the super's name, fine. I will tell you what you need to know about the super on page 300 when you need to know it again. But in the meantime, I want you to be invested in these characters and what they want and what they're doing to try to get what they want. And I don't mean want from a greed perspective. I just mean what is their motivation here in this scene, in this entire story. And I try to have what I think of as peaks and valleys of action. And a lot of the valleys are about character development. And without the valleys, the peaks do not look high. And that part of what I'm trying to accomplish is to keep you invested in the valleys by teasing out information that you don't necessarily know you're waiting for, so that you continue to learn about these people and continue to get invested in them. And then when the action peaks arrive, they are so much scarier than they otherwise would have been because you know what these characters are facing and you care about them.
Mm.
Does that make sense?
It absolutely makes sense. And that's something that I always love in a book, the way that these lighter moments can either diffuse tension or they can make the tension hit harder, when you're like a little bit distracted by a moment of levity or like one of these like only in New York moments that kind of pepper this novel.
Yeah.
That's something that I really love about it is that from my time living in the city, I just remember constantly having this feeling of walking around either a building or a street or a park of just like being surrounded by other people's stories,
Yeah.
that as we are, to circle back, that kind of happened to intersect with yours as you ping pong off each other. And it just really is like, it really captures that feeling of being in New York and just being exposed to so many more walks of life, so many different types of personalities than, I'm sure it happens other places, but I am a parochial New Yorker who believes the only in New York stuff. So
Well, New York is exceedingly diverse and not just ethnically diverse, but diverse in every way. And I think that's one of the magical things about it. And that's something that I was trying to capture in this book, that every single crowded subway car is a miracle of human diversity. It's every religion, every gender, every ethnicity, every political point of view, every way that a human being can look and be in this world is possibly represented in the 200 people packed on a downtown one train during rush hour. And although it can make things difficult in New York, it is also the amazing thing about being in a place like this. And which is not to say that the same isn't true elsewhere. It's just so much in New York and it's so concentrated and it's so daily that we can't ignore it. And I think that's one of the defining factors of New York City is the types of things, the types of issues that might be ignorable in some places are not ignorable here because they're in your face every day. And issues being in your face is something that is really one of the main premises of this novel, that here it is. Here's one day. Here are these people from different walks of life. Here are the issues. They all have to confront all of these issues today and tonight.
So it has been a year since the book's release, and we are coming upon the paperback release. The day that everybody hears this is, in fact, that day. So head to your favorite bookstore or library, wherever you like to go. How has your perspective on the book changed at all in the past year? How have you, looking back at it, I guess, like, do you see new things in your work, sort of the further you get away from it?
Yes, I do. And a lot of it has to do with the reception of the book out there in the world. And just a few days ago, I got back from a week in Italy, where I'd gone to Rome to visit a book festival and uh, for the Italian the publication of the Italian translation. And I did a lot of media while I was in Rome. I was on like the Italian version of CNN and in the Italian Wall Street Journal. And all in all, I did like 20 different media appearances, lots of television, lots of radio, lots of print interviews in big publications. And everybody was talking to me about how this book is a portrait of America in the age of Trump. And I started writing this book 6 years ago. I finished writing it 2 years ago. It was published a year ago. It seems to me sometimes like I was writing this book at a different moment in time, about that moment in time, but that moment of time is still right now. And the issues that I was writing about, that I decided to start writing about a half dozen years ago, are just as front and center and dangerous and powerful and divisive as they were then. And America is on the same path that it was then and headed towards Lord knows what. I mean, we're taping this well in advance of its air date. I mean, well in advance in the modern day. Like, a month ago, we had no idea that we could possibly be at war. And right now we are. And a month from now, who knows what's going to be going on? That in some ways, world events have become so accelerated, but the state of America has remained very much the same for a long time now. And it's America that I despair of, and it's an America that Italians despair of. And they were quick to tell me how worried they are about America and how, for everybody's entire lifetime, America was something to aspire to. And now they are worried that the world might be a better place without us.
Really striking, and to be experiencing the opinions of people outside the country at this moment while it's all still unfolding, and talking about this book's reception while things are changing every day sounds humbling to say the least, and very challenging to say the most. I appreciate you taking the time to talk about it with us and our listeners, and we look forward to seeing you on the island. By the time folks hear this, that will have passed. So do we use the future pluperfect? Like, you will have been on Long Island at
Oh,
that point, and
excellent.
it will have been fun.
Yes, it will have
So,
been fun. Yeah.
yeah. Before we go, what is on your horizon? Are you writing anything now?
Oh, I am. Yeah. I'm writing. I'm not going to talk about what's in it because I never do that. But I'm writing a novel that really I've been thinking about for years, and I've been writing for a couple of years. And when I started writing it, it felt like, oh my God, it's so much about now. And the closer I get to the end, the more urgent it seems, because it's really about now in a way that I could not have contemplated 2 years ago. And it's a spy novel.
Mm. Well, I look forward to reading that too.
Thank you.
And listeners, please check out The Doorman. It is available right now as hardcover and available as of today, as of you're hearing this, as paperback. So check it out. Do you have a favorite bookstore, perhaps in New York City, that you like to send people to?
Oh my God, I have a lot of favorite bookstores, and I have friends who are booksellers at different stores. So I'm not allowed to pick a favorite
Yeah.
uh, in New York City. I will pick a favorite on Long Island, though, because I have just the one local in Greenport. It's Burton's Books, and I absolutely love Burton's.
Oh, that's excellent. And we love to hear the North Fork shouted out. So that's great. All right, everybody. Thank you for joining us. It has been a pleasure to share this book with you, and I do hope you check it out. All right, it is time to close this chapter. We'll see you next time.
It's time to close this chapter of Turn the Page. Join us for the next episode.